everyone, I'm Lawson Oblad, and I would like to teach you the basics of percussion. As my audience, I would like you to leave knowing good technique, how to read sheet music, and at the very end, hopefully, how to play the bass drum. I've been playing in percussion for 4 years, since 6th grade, and have been taught by our very own percussion director, Mr. Neal. Learning the basics of percussion is fairly simple, with only needing 8 materials. The materials needed are a practice pad to practice and learn technique with, a surface to put the practice pad on, such as a stand or a counter, snare drumsticks, also to practice and learn technique with, a bass drum, a bass harness, which is used for marching, which I won't go over, bass stand, a bass mallets, water, and tennis shoes. They don't have to be tennis shoes as long as they are closed-toed and comfortable. The first step is technique, which includes your posture, what level the pad should go, where your wrists, fingers, and arms go, and also how they move when you're playing. The correct posture for playing is having your feet about the width of your shoulders, straight back, loose shoulders so they're not tensing up, which is bad for playing, by the way. Your arms and fingers and wrists should go out in front of you, and that's your good posture. The level of your pad should be about as tall as your waist, which mine isn't right now, but I can fix that. Now that I got to the proper pad level, I can show you how to hold the stick. This specific stick has a little signature right there. The best way to hold it is to kind of put your thumb at the end of it and wrap your fingers around it. If there's a little gap here, it's called a cavity, and that's not good. You need to close that gap, and you should have a little bit of stick sticking out of the end. Don't stick out your finger or your thumb too much, because that can make it hard to do specific strokes, like the buzz stroke, the double stroke, like... It just makes it really difficult to play it. Also, whenever you hold it, make sure your pinky doesn't fly off. I kind of am in the habit of doing that. So start early, don't do that. And then whenever you have both sticks, kind of just do the same thing, wrap around. Try to make a 90-degree angle near the center of your pad. Don't do it in the exact center, because whenever you stroke, you can hit your stick, and you do sometimes do that on purpose, but not usually. So kind of about an inch apart. And then whenever you raise the sticks, use your wrists. Don't use your arms. That's not how you play. Don't use your fingers, because not really much happens. So use your wrists, bring it up as high as you can. That's your playing height. And then if you want to stroke down, just use your wrist to stroke down and bring it back up to here. And then it kind of naturally rebounds, because, watch. It naturally does that, so you don't need to add anything, like, it just naturally does that, so you can just save it. Anyways, yeah, that's basically how you move your fingers, and eventually when you get super fast, you can start to use your arms, or when you're doing double stroke rolls, you can kind of loosen up the back, squeeze the front. Oh, and also whenever you're holding it, don't squeeze too hard, because it makes it sound really closed. So kind of open it up a little bit. It makes it a lot wholer. Because it just sounds really tight and closed. And then if you start getting like really fast, you should only, like if you're at a pretty slow pace and you're playing doubles, which is a double stroke, it's two strokes with your hand in a row. So you can do it with both hands. If you're getting really quickly, you can kind of just use your fingers like that. And yeah. All right. Now that we have learned how to hold the stick, I can teach you how to read sheet music. The first thing is called strokes and rudiments. A stroke and a rudiment is basically just how you hit the drum. Single stroke is just stroke it once, and you kind of have to rebound up to wherever your height was. So if you were forte, which I'll get into later, if it's forte, you'll go all the way up. If it's piano, you just kind of go down here. That's a single stroke. Double stroke is just hitting it twice on one stick at a time. So single stroke, you just kind of alternate. Double stroke, kind of go from one stick to the other, like that. And then a buzz, or multiple stroke, is kind of, you tighten up your thumb and your finger, and you kind of lift the back fingers, and you kind of get this nice buzzing sound. And if you do a bunch of them, it's a buzz roll. And as you get quieter, and as you get louder. And then double stroke roll, just kind of tell differently than a buzz stroke, because this just has two different strokes. You can kind of tell the difference. Oh, that's kind of dirty. But then the next one, a paradiddle. That's a rudiment. It's just sticking. It's right, left, right, right. That's what the letters on the bottom mean. The R means right, L means left, and it doesn't really happen much, but when it's a beat, it means both hands. That doesn't happen too often, but it does sometimes happen. And a single paradiddle, it's just, and usually the first one is accented, which is just a fancy way of saying louder. And then the next one, a flam, you kind of have one higher than the other, and you bring them down at the same time. But the higher one, that's as loud as normal, but once you add a flam, it's just two different notes, and that's it. You don't make it louder unless it's an accented flam, which I won't get into today, but it just accents the bigger note. And then the last one, a drag. It's basically a flam, but with a double in the beginning. And that's it for the rudiments and strokes. Now, if you're having a little bit of trouble doing your doubles, kind of start out pretty slowly. And a good way to get better at it is an exercise called knocking. It's basically just put your hands on the pad or anything really. Like, you can sit down and do it on your knees, or if you want, and then basically just kind of do the same motion you would to hit a stick, and it's the exact same motion as, well, make sure whenever you're playing, keep this level and kind of your elbows out a little bit, because if you do this, it's really uncomfortable, and if you do this, you can't play as good. And yeah, that's it for rudiments and strokes. Now onto dynamics. A dynamic is basically a fancy way of saying how loud or soft it is. Like I said earlier, an accent is basically just louder than it usually is. Forte is usually about this much. My teacher always associated dynamics with inches, so piano would about be an inch. Mezzo piano, which is basically saying sorta loud or sorta quiet. Sorta quiet is about 3 inches. Mezzo forte, which is sorta loud, is about 5 inches to 5 to 7. And then forte is like 8 or 9 inches. And then fortissimo is even louder. Fortissimo is basically your full height. Sometimes it gets really crazy, like fortissimo. And you kind of have to use your arm sometimes too, because you will not get that loud just using your hands and wrists and fingers. And then, yeah, that's it for dynamics, basically. Except there is this thing called a crescendo, which is getting louder, and then a decrescendo, which is getting softer. And then, yeah, that basically is it for dynamics. You know what? We've come a long way. I think we're ready for the bass drum. And now that it's the next day, and fresh new pair of clothes, I brought the bass drum out right here, and I'm about to show you how to put it on, how to adjust this to the right height, how to tell if it's the right height, and also the changing technique, which is not that much. Okay, once everything's tight and secure and even, which it isn't, you can start to put your bass drum on and kind of just hold it and make sure the white logo is near the bottom. And there's this thing called, I forgot what it's called, but kind of put your fingers here on the knobs, and see if it's equal. If it is, you're doing it right. And a good way to tell if it's your height is to put the sticks right here, and then make sure the sticks are perpendicular to the ground. Then to test it, you bring your arms down until your arms are parallel with the ground. Mine is perfect because it's in the center. That means you're doing it good. And the technique is the exact same for the practice pad. You just kind of twist it, and you the same stroke, just horizontal. And yeah, that's it for setting up the drum. Okay, now that you have a basic understanding of how to set up the stand of the drum and the technique, basically the exact same way to hold it, I'm going to teach you how to read the sheet music. Now, for bass drums, each drum has a specific note that they play, unless it's in unison, which all the drums play. Well, all the bass drums, that is. This specific drum line, we have 5 bass drums. This is the biggest one, so this is bass 5. So that's represented by the lowest note on the staff, which in this case, in the exercise 8s, it's represented by the F space. So whenever it happens, just play it. And right now, I don't have any of the other basses because our percussion director, Mr. Neal, he kind of took them away because we're not allowed to have them. But I got lucky. And so whenever it on the piece, whenever you play it, you just, I highlight my notes that I get. So right now it's and then sometimes we like to add 2s on it, so it's instead of just, and then we add 3s on it after, and then 4s, and that's the split 8s. The unison is kind of boring. It's just the other part I wanted to show you. Whenever you're done, you kind of just bring your hands back up as soon as you finish, well, on the beat after you finish. And yeah, so that's basically it for learning how to play the bass drum. So let's go over what we did today. First of all, we learned how to keep proper technique and read sheet music, and actually learned how to play the bass drum at a beginning level. And I hope that learning how to play the bass drum could be useful to you in some way. And if you don't have access to a bass drum, then I hope you could use it usefully on a practice pad. And maybe even translate the technique to playing the drum set. Thank you for listening to me. Have a good rest of your day.